Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has again slammed the mass protests against the jailing of his main political rival. Erdogan says the demonstrations have become a movement of violence and he is vowing to hold the biggest opposition party accountable. Large demonstrations continued across Turkey on Monday following the arrest of Istanbul Mayor Ekrem Imamoglu last week.
Confronting riot police in the streets of Istanbul, despite a ban on street gatherings. Anti-government demonstrations in Turkey continued for a sixth consecutive night, with hundreds of thousands taking part.
We want the government to resign. We want to keep our democratic rights. We are fighting for a freer Turkey. We are not terrorists, we are students, and the reason we are here is to exercise our democratic rights and to defend democracy.
The unrest began last Wednesday when the city's mayor, Ekrem Imamoglu, was arrested on corruption charges. He's President Erdogan's main political rival and is now being held in jail, pending trial. Speaking at a cabinet meeting in Ankara, Erdogan accused Imamoglu's party, the main opposition CHP, of inciting the unrest.
The sole party responsible for the injuries suffered by our police officers, the shattered windows of shopkeepers, and the billions of liras in public property damage caused by the attacks of vandals, is the main opposition leader and his associates. They will be held politically accountable in Parliament and legally accountable before the judiciary.
At the heart of the rallies, the opposition party's leader called for the nationwide protests to continue.
Erdogan, you were saying they would protest on the first day, slow down on the second, and forget on the third day. It has been a week, and as the young people say, this is just the beginning. We will keep fighting.
More than 1,000 people have been arrested since the protest began, including several journalists.
Let's get more now from DW reporter Dorian Jones joining us from Istanbul. Dorian, more than 1,000 protesters arrested and now journalists arrested from their homes. Is this a sign of an expanding crackdown against these protests?
Well, it certainly does appear like that, along with the arrests that are occurring on the streets during the protests. Increasingly now the security forces are coming to the doors of those people who have taken part in protests. What you have to realise is that Istanbul is one of the most surveilled cities in the world, and the Turkish security forces have some of the most sophisticated facial recognition. So it does make it very easy for them to track down people who took part in protests and find them where they live. And they've been doing increasingly these dawn raids, where the people wake up with police at their door, along with the journalists who are starting to appear in court today. At least 10 journalists will be in court facing a myriad of charges. Also protesters too, although many, for now at least, are just receiving cautions. But I think this is part of this strategy by the president and his security forces to start to undermine the process, to start to weaken its momentum, to instill an element of fear among the protesters, that maybe they will think twice before turning up on the streets again, knowing that they could get a knock on the door in the coming days and weeks ahead. And we've heard President Erdogan ramping up his rhetoric, warning that there will be people taking part will be held legally accountable. People know that President Erdogan doesn't make empty threats. But on the other side, it could well galvanise the protesters, because there is a sense of feeling that this is the last battle, from speaking to protesters, the last battle to defend Turkish democracy. So it's both sides seem to be strengthening their positions, and further protests and arrests are expected.
How widespread are these protests? Are they truly nationwide, or is this primarily happening in Istanbul?
No, not at all. Along with most of Turkey's main cities, I've seen very large protests. They've also been occurring in provincial cities and towns, even in areas which traditionally support the president. And I think that really will be one of the main concerns for President Erdogan. He recognises that there is strong opposition in the main cities, but his main support is now in the provinces. But there too, there is starting to be growing protests and unrest, and that will instill memories of the last time that there was a major upheaval, and that was in 2013, known as the Gezi protest. And that was the closest Erdogan came to being ousted from power. And he will be very aware that he needs to get on top of these protests before the momentum gets too great for his security forces to stop it.
So the strength of this crackdown from the Erdogan government, is this also a way for Erdogan to buff up his strongman image among his base?
I don't think that he sees that so much as an opportunity. I think he really wants this to end and end quickly, because I think that he realizes that this is fast becoming a major threat to him in his presidency. And more than that, it's unnerving the financial markets. Last week saw major falls on the currency, and the Turkish central bank spent up to $30 billion supporting the currency. That is unsustainable going forward. And Erdogan is very aware that he needs to get this under control, because the country is in the midst of one of the worst cost of living crisis in living memory, and that too is feeding into these protests. So Erdogan, the last thing Erdogan wants is a financial crisis coming on top of these political protests.
The opposition CHP party has also named Imamoglu as its presidential candidate for the 2028 election. Firstly, isn't that a little too early to name a presidential candidate for an election that's 3 years away?
Well, I think this is part of the opposition's awareness that Imamoglu could face a move against him. It's been widely known for a long time that he is seen as probably the best person from the opposition to defeat Erdogan. He was way ahead in many opinion polls, and Imamoglu knew that there were a threat of investigations against him. So I think that his decision to start running for the presidential election, he started crisscrossing the country earlier this month, was a way of he believes, of thwarting any move against him, believing that Erdogan wouldn't dare take such a move against a person running for the presidency. That possibly was a miscalculation, but that was, I think, the reason why he decided to move now, because he didn't think he would have that opportunity in the future.
We'll leave it there for the moment. DW reporter Dorian Jones in Istanbul. Thanks so much.